What's going on, everybody? I'm Tom.
I'm Pat.
And I'm Zach.
We're best friends, and you're listening to the Reminiscent Podcast. They say you can't choose your family. Well, you also can't choose which era of music you grew up in. This is a weekly show where we discuss our favorite bands from adolescence and how they continue to shape our lives today. Each week, we'll head back to the early 2000s and take a closer look at the cards we were dealt.
Hey.
Whoa, with the heavy sigh. How are you?
Sorry. Yeah. I've noticed that whenever I make a long point on this show, I've been listening more and more kind of over the past year. And I always take a deep inhale or exhale through my nose that I think is very discreet, but the Yeti has bests me every time. And everyone has been listening to me breathe after I talk for long periods of time on this show for the whole duration. So I might have to pull a Tejon Day and move my mouth away from the mic as I breathe.
Yeah, so the Yeti is a hotly contested microphone in podcasting. I actually lower your breaths, so what you're hearing in the podcast is actually a quieter version than what I deal with on my end, but it is my pleasure.
It's weird because it's an inhale. You think...
It's the exhales, right? It's when you're ending?
Yeah, it's weird because you think I'd be like pushing air out and I would need to bring air in. It's really, we're past the point of me being like at first weird about hearing my own voice because we've been doing this for so long. Now I'm critiquing my own breathing patterns. So this is just fun to do, guys. What can I say? No, this episode is from Twitter. This is like kind of not our first dive, but kind of we're going to do an experiment. Is that fair to say? How would you describe what we're about to do?
I'd say it's pretty experimental. We're taking two things that don't belong together and just trying to smash them into one episode, but it's out of love.
But it is an apology, and it is out of love, because one of our listeners hit us on Twitter, Erica, and asked us months ago for an Incubus episode or anything remotely involving Incubus. So I tried to do like a soundtrack battle based episode that Tom and I were trying to workshop, but it didn't quite come to fruition. Mostly because I went down the rabbit hole of soundtracks, and I saw that Little Nicky had a really weird soundtrack, including an Incubus song. I was like, this is a way we could, like the most roundabout way I can think of to talk about. We were trying to do this like head-to-head soundtrack battle episode where it was like the Cheaper by the Dozen soundtrack, for example, head-to-head with the Little Nicky soundtrack, which I don't know how we'd gauge who would win, but we were going to talk about him and whatever we felt in our hearts after like an hour of debate. For obvious reasons, that didn't quite necessarily rush to the front of the line. Anyway, Erica has been continuing to listen out of the goodness of her heart, despite us spurning her Incubus needs. And we're here with a little bit of Linkin Park talk and a little bit of something corporate talk. We're going to take it back to the year 2002/2003.
Yeah, real quick, I do want to give more of a shout out to Erica. I help her with her podcast called Sex Talk with Erica Miley, and it is honestly one of the most fascinating podcasts I've ever listened to. If you are interested in sex, which I think most humans are, you will definitely want to check the show out. So, yeah, I, obviously, the emo boy, sad forevs, am going to be covering Meteora on this episode.
Which I know very little about, and I will be talking about Leaving Through the Window by Something Corporate. Which
I heard the first three songs of for the first time in my life about 20 minutes ago.
You probably knew more songs than you thought you did off that record. I would venture a guess.
I knew Hurricane again because of James McCallion. We mention his name so often on the show. He was the curator for our entire school at one point, I think.
It was a hot stretch. He was like the underground DJ for sure. Right. With the mix CDs on point.
We had that older brother, man. That's where it all comes from.
It's true. That's true. He one of those like moments where you go over to their house and MTV2 is on or something, and the brand new music video where he's at the bar and everybody's mimicking his movements. I think it's for Six Change at Gloria, maybe.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And yeah. Anyway, he knew what it was already. I was like, well, you guys are on to some other stuff.
Well, speaking of that, so what was your first interaction with this album then?
That's the thing, is I didn't really even get to it until college. So we're kind of breaking some rules because Erica has requested good stuff, but we couldn't really find. There's only so many bands that you and I both know well enough to talk about, as you may have guessed. That's why we started going music video by music video instead of artist by artist. Like we came out at episode 100 with like a really well-researched set of like Paramore and who's the Canadian Valkyrie, Avril Lavigne. I remember it more for the title of our show episode rather than her at this point, just because my brain's so jumbled. But so yeah, now we're trying to get creative. But so I didn't hear it till college, but it did come out in 02, 03. I forget which one. I think Meteora might have been the 02 record, but it is probably a walking around campus album for me 10 years later, like 10 years later than it would have been that for at least some of our listeners that I can think of. I guess, yeah, I don't know, but it's weird because you know Punk Rock Princess probably, and you probably know Woke Up in a Car, but I didn't really like realize how great Woke Up in a Car was until probably my sophomore year of college. And it's like, oh man. I hate when I find something that's been so good for so long and I've just been living with it in the world near me and in my reach and have just ignored it for so long so it's frustrating to find out that I could have had a full decade's worth of like high school bus trips and road trips and stuff with these songs floating in between my ears. But yeah, I'm glad it did eventually happen. I will say that heading into our discussion. What about you? What's your Meteora story?
Well, I do want to talk quickly about my only interaction with something corporate. There were two. I did have Hurricane on my blue 4 gig iPod mini, which every day I want to just buy one on eBay just to like have it there.
It's an iconic machine.
Yeah, dude, it seriously is.
That and your Razor that you had a look. There was a strong mood associated with what you had the DC shorts and DC kicks and DC shirts.
DC is going to come back hard in this episode.
I'm excited to hear and dive and bathe in all of it.
So I had the song Hurricane because of James McCallion. I think I just ripped a bunch of stuff off of his iTunes library. And I very specifically remember working at Eaton Park, which is like a family diner. Think of the oval plates with the color around the edges. You know exactly what kind of fucking diner I'm talking about. And at the time, we were trying to rename our band, which was called 4 Under Par. And I was kind of hiding in the back room where we changed the soda.
I didn't know you worked there. What'd you do?
I was a dishwasher for a while. Yeah.
Up on P Street?
Yeah. Right next to the Pizza Bomber site. Right across the street.
Dude. That eerie life.
Did not mean to laugh at that, but
no, it's just like that's a harsh reality of it all. Right. Like it's like how can you not kind of laugh because it's so like abrupt
bizarre,
to even know that it was part of our anyway.
So I was back in that kind of soda room, and I'm hiding back there on my Motorola Razr, texting you guys about our band name, and at some point, someone suggested Corporate Casual. And I was like, oh, that's kind of funny because everyone greatly misused the word casual in 8th grade. It was like the word for like cool or like that's so radical, dude. It was just casual. And you shut it down because you said it sounded too much like something corporate, which was very relevant at the time. And I never thought like until 10 minutes ago, like corporate casual was that like a play on business casual? Like also who came up with it? Like that's my only interaction with something corporate, really.
It's interesting to say that because I don't remember having much. I'm trying to think of what something corporate song I would have even been aware of at the time to have shut it down like that. But because I don't know, we've lived in different musical worlds other than, I guess, on the show we talk about where we intersect. But I think you and I have listened to there's like the Venn diagram, the show is in the middle, but that sliver is actually very small. I'm trying to think I wasn't even listening to that really in depth yet. Because at that point, there had been some Jack's Mannequin stuff out, right? Like,
oh, is it the same singer?
Yeah.
Damn, I knew his voice was familiar. Okay.
Right, because I remember I DJ'd for the local Gannon University radio station before sophomore year, and there was some Jack's Mannequin stuff on the radio, I think, where he was singing a little bit about his sick illnesses and things like that, if I recall. My timeline might be off, but... So yeah, but it's hard to say. But you were living in you were hardcore Linkin Park for years at this point. You are way more like able to talk about the record you're representing today, which I guess it's not a debate. It's more of just like we're doing a 5 for 5 things we love most or hate most, or just 5 things we need to say about these albums.
Yeah. So my first experience with Meteora, Dan Majeski, who ended up going to high school with us, we went to grade school together, like from I think like second grade and on or something. And I've mentioned it on the show before. I don't know where, but my sister found a bike in the woods, like by our house. And it was a pretty nice bike. And I knew Dan Majeski was really into BMX bikes, as was his brother. And his dad was a car mechanic. So they would just like build bikes and work on them all the time. So one weekend, we made plans to go over and like get this bike running because it was pretty trashed. And we spent like 6 hours in the basement. I mean, he took apart my bottom bracket. He was re-greasing fucking parts of this bike I can't even think of the names of right now, ball bearings and stuff. He even brought out like paint and was like refinishing chipped paint on this bike, trued my wheels and everything. And the whole time we did that, like 6 hours, he was playing Linkin Park. And it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And it was the first time I'd ever heard anything even remotely close to this genre.
Which is what?
Which is like folks at home, kind of like industrial rap, rock, metal influence stuff.
Is it rap metal?
Does she turntables in her eyes?
Dude, don't disrespect Bowling for Soup. Like ever since I heard that lyric, honestly, I'd rather just shift gears and only talk about Girl All the Bad Guys Want for the next hour. But ever since I've heard him try to describe rap metal, I think it's a reference to Fred Durst. But the episode on what that lyric means is an episode that we're going to have to do very soon, because it's been kind of my Sasquatch Hunters / Ghost Bros show. Like that would be my Bravo TV television reality program. It's just interviewing members of bands from that era. Like, what do you think? I mean, it's got to be Durst, right? But Durst, is it an act? If he were in court and sued for something, would he necessarily blame it on the persona itself? And are we really mad at Durst himself or the era? Anyway. But you were in the basement working on a bike.
Right. So like this band just blew my mind. We listened to Meteora probably 3 times, and we hit on Hybrid Theory because he was like, oh, if you like this, you should hear their first album or the previous album, which I think was their first major release. And
do they have one that's considered their best?
I'm not sure, because like I don't know much beyond these 2, and I know it changed after these 2. I think most people would probably still say Hybrid Theory is their best, but I could be horribly wrong. Tweet at the show @_FM. Let me know.
And I'm not putting you on the spot, like, what do you think? Who would judge you? But like, if you went to a show and you expected to hear the most hits of a certain record, I'm just curious what the general consensus. I guess there was 2 or 3 mega hits off that Hybrid Theory, the first well-known effort, I would have to assume, and I don't know.
I think it also greatly depends on like which generation you're talking to, because they had a ton of radio hits, but like they were known for different things at different times. So
give me a hit off Meteora. What era are we talking about here?
I mean, the one that everyone in the world probably knows is Numb, right? Like that was the song.
One of their most, what they would be known for, I guess, except the one where he talks about, I have to just grasp at every opportunity for a Linkin Park take I have in my brain. The one where it's not worth, gosh darn it.
You're doing a great job there, bud. Keep going.
Yeah. Figure it out.
Figure it out.
Figure it out. The one where is it worth the effort or something? Come back to me. Edit this the hell out.
Okay. All right. So yeah, Numb.
In the end, it doesn't really matter. That's got to be a Hybrid Theory hit. Okay.
And
that's the
job.
most famous song, right?
Really good job.
In the end, I believe is the title of that track. If I had to venture a guess on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which was probably still a Regis Philbin hosted show at this point in 2002, if I had to guess.
Also, in the end, you're thinking of a completely different album, but that's okay.
Oh, really? What album was that?
That was Hybrid Theory.
Oh, right. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that would be their best hit. So Meteora maybe is not their greatest album, but they still had some. I don't know if they'd be bops or if what would they be?
Ooh.
Has Linkin Park ever, by definition, released a bop?
I think some of their later albums could probably constitute
Where they let the
few
dude rap
bops,
a little more?
Sure.
Bleed It Out might be a bop.
Numb was huge. I remember taking my mom's flip phone and playing the polyphonic ringtone samples when my iPod was dead. Like at parties, like her cast parties with adults. I was feeling nervous. But Somewhere I Belong was like kind of big, but not quite. Yeah, I think Hybrid Theory is probably their more commercial successful album. If I had done the research and found the numbers, I would know. But I'm not going to do that right now. Anyways.
So what's your first takeaway or your first? You have 5 takes. What's number 1?
My first one was usually I hate intros to albums. Like the Billie Eilish, right? It's like this 11-second kind of like bullshit thing. Like, why is this here? But the intro that Linkin Park does from Forward to Don't Stay is amazing. It starts off like thunder, rain, this like pulsing metallic hammering sound that slowly gets up to the tempo of the song, and then like there's broken glass, and then Don't Stay starts. And like they could have just made that the intro of the song rather than the album, right? Get the Forward out of there with how seamless it was. And I don't think I've heard at that point. I wasn't listening to albums really up until that point. So like hearing the thought and the preparation and just what went into making that like a really intriguing buildup kind of blew my mind as a 14-year-old.
Nothing wrong with that. I'm going to go ahead and stick up for the random weird intros and album listening overall. I do love playlists and how the different devices we listen to music on have evolved, obviously. But there's something to be said for listening to something front to back on a road trip that takes you to a different place. So I'm pro weird noises, if I had to say.
But you were anti when Taylor Swift ends the song, I think it was Stay, 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 where she says, "It's so fun."
That's a different thing. I don't know if that's a gotcha. Yes. We're talking about intros to albums like 2 seconds ago. Yeah, that's a
Well, I just mean like supplementary stuff that isn't the song, I guess.
Okay, let me rephrase whatever take. You can go find the audio, and if I'm really contradicting myself, but I'm not saying take it out. I'm just saying it was kind of dumb. I think she had earned it at that point in the record. She had pumped out like 7 absolute like, I love Red. Right. But if I had to make one critique, it's like, that's a little self-indulgent. But she had earned it. So it can stay, but I don't have to like it.
It can stay.
It can stay. Ooh,
okay.
Nice. I'm not even mad. That was nice. All right. So I'm going to come in with I get 1 of 5 takes. That was your one?
That was my
the
one.
intro? You like it because it works so well?
Yeah, it was just very thoughtful, I thought.
Nothing wrong with that. It's probably why you appreciated Angels and Airwaves later with their thoughtful build-ups and everything like that. If I had to guess. Mine is also first audio related that you hear on the record. I've never listened to I Want to Save You all the way through. I've only ever skipped the fucking entirety of that song on Leaving Through the Window. It opens up, to me, Punk Rock Princess is like one of the most iconic jams of the pop punk early 2000s specific genre that we base this whole show in and live kind of in that cocoon. And I Want to Save You does not fit at all, ever. And it's just so dumb. I don't know. It's people who actually love the band are probably like, you just don't. It's like, maybe I don't, but whatever. That shit. I've never once like been like sat down, said, I'm going to listen to Leaving Through the Window. And thank God it starts with I Want to Save You, because there's like 3 of the best, but like their greatest hits record could start with the 3 songs that are tracks 2, 3, and 4 on that record. And I Want to Save You is not included at all in that. So, yeah, I would say that, I don't know why. I would have to ask Andrew McMahon why. He put on such a good show with Bunbury last year too, and I actually got a really good photo. He like climbed on the crowd. He was going absolutely crazy on these like inflatable swans and stuff. Really great show. But I should have asked him, like, hey, what's up with I Want to Save You? I got questions, man. So that's all. Pretty short take. Not all of them are negative. Most of them are glowingly positive. But I didn't want to not say that. So I kind of switched the rules on our Google Doc earlier to say, like, okay, 5 actual takes, whether positive or negative. I don't know if you have any counters or anything like that. It just seems out of place to me.
That's fine. My number 2 here, just digging deep. I mean, I was really into this album like pretty soon after it first came out, and figure .09, which I really want to know what that means. I'm sure it's up there somewhere. So I feel like I'm contradicting myself last week by saying Metallica did not rock hard because their drums were lame.
I did want to touch on that because, man, you probably heard it when you edited. I was very upset.
I said
I'm
that
not sure I
clip
phrased
aside.
the question correctly or what, but when you were like, oh, Metallica sucks, I'm like, yes, but that's not what we're even trying to say here. We're just trying to, like, are they an example of a band who would, quote, have rocked in the history of people who have recorded guitar work? And like them and AC/DC came to mind, and it was just a mess is what it was. And we should do an episode where we walk through that hand in hand. I don't mean to get upset, but I would just like, wait a minute. Wait just a gosh darn minute. Anyway.
All right, so I'm going to just make a fool of myself and say the reason that I liked the song Figure .09 was because when I was 13, I was like pretty new to drums, and it was a very accessible song to learn how to play drums on. And I remember I had a crush on this girl in 7th grade. Her name was Sam. And early dismissal, she would always walk to our friend Lindsay's house, which was like 3 blocks away from mine. And I always thought at some point I would get her to come to my house instead. And one day I asked the 3 girls that would walk to her house if they would come to my house because I wanted to play drums for them.
Whoa. One of the 3 was a girl you had a crush on?
Yes. And I made them sit there for 3.5 agonizing minutes as I played the same beat over and over and over. And like halfway through, the girl that I liked was like, yeah, can you like, can you be done now or something? I was like, wait, there's a really cool part coming up. And it was in like the last 5 seconds of the song where he did like 2 crash hits in a row rather than just one. And like, because I was such an amateur, or like not even, I was just starting out, it blew my mind. And I thought they would be so impressed, and they just did not want to be there. And I don't think that's a good memory, but it's funny. Like,
well, I don't want to just jump out here and that you went for it and you shot a shot. And it was a fair shot. It was within the boundaries. You were respectful. You did a thing that you did. How did later? Was it ever discussed between you and this young lady afterward?
It was never discussed. No.
No. Okay. So I'm assuming it did not work.
Well, no. I mean, ultimately, my goals of winning her love did not work. But
okay, you guys are not currently.
There's
wed.
some off-air stories. which are innocent as can be. We were in like 6th grade, so.
Oh, okay. I'm curious if there are certain things in life like that's something you're going to have to die never having talked to them about. You know what I mean? Like that rotation of 10 to 15 to 25, depending on how anxious of a person you are, things to keep you up when you can't sleep and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That sounds like one of the core ones for you that's been lingering for a while. I think mine was, I was trying to sing, like there was a girl in class in 1st grade, and I'm like, the song from like the church group that we sing together because we happen to go to the same parish or whatever, or same church and same youth group, really young. And I was trying to sing like the melody, but I'm not a good singer and I couldn't get it. It's one of the things where you look up and you're the last 2 people talking in the room when the whole class is turned around looking at you and everything. And it was a story time nonetheless. So we're all sitting on the carpet and the teacher was waiting to start reading again for me to shut the fuck up. And everyone knew, even the person I was talking to, the girl, was not reciprocating. And she was like, I was like, the song. And she was motionless because she knew the situation that I did not. That's got to be the oldest cringe moment that is in my brain. I'm really worried that it's going to be one of the few things I say when my brain is, when I undoubtedly enter into my all summer years. It's just going to be in the rotation for sure. Like, man, that really just haunts me to this day. Anyway, it happens to the best of us.
Well,
I think is what I'm trying to say.
I think you also told that story like 3 weeks ago, so it seems to be
it's one of the it's been around the longest. It's not the most embarrassing, I think, all things considered, because I was in first grade, but it's definitely the oldest member. Like, if they all had personalities in some weird cartoon version of my brain, be like, oh, hey, wow, hey, old timer. Like, yeah, you guys don't even know. If you're here, you're not going anywhere. Like, you're going to get thought about a lot. Trust me. So, anyway.
Oh, man.
I'm sorry to hear that the drum thing didn't work out, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
But I'm glad you at least tried, you know?
Yeah, I worked hard on that, man.
It probably inspired you to practice the hell out of those drums.
Yeah. She'll see me on stage someday and regret not paying attention.
This is figure 09. It's for well, you know who you are. Just like it's a fallen past love or something, but really it's just a random crush when you were in middle school or something.
And in some universe, the drummer announces the songs, right?
It could be like a Sum 41 thing. I said like on master. Okay, my next. Ooh, this is a simple one. If You See Jordan, the song title. C is just the letter C. AIM was probably at its height at this point. I'm just saying there's a couple aspects of Leaving Through the Window that are, I'm going to say low-key iconic. I'm going to say the abbreviation of the word C and If You See Jordan is going to be one of them. I'm going to go ahead and hit you with another one of my takes. In terms of the low-key iconic aspect of this album being, if you're trying to take a snapshot of 02, 03, aliens are here, they need to understand. I'm going to go with the khakis collared shirt under the sweater combo the lead singer wears in the music video for Punk Rock Princess. I'm going to say that's low-key iconic as well. So the titles of the song and what he wore, that was like the prepster. I mean, people don't really call people preppy anymore. Like, to be preppy was, more oft discussed then than it is now. It's not that you can't be preppy now, but it was more of a thing then. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I think we're just not in high school anymore, so that kind of doesn't matter.
That's a good point. That's an excellent point.
Plus, we call them Chads now.
Style is more like whether or not it leans into the hipster, this or that. Then there was more of a collar, what you were doing with those collars, how many there were, whether or not there was a sweater, whether or not khakis were in, like
so many collars.
It was more defined by what the prepsterishness of what was happening was what was on you. Now it's more of a, the buzzword is hipster as opposed to preppy. I think like the conversation's just shifted slightly. Maybe some of the same features are there, but I'm just going to say that names of the songs, abbreviations, unironically, just like AIM era, that, they're not trying to be funny or ironic about like making fun of it. That's just like what it was. It would be my guess. I could think of so many people that dressed like him from that video.
Yeah,
just off of that. And it wasn't even a laughable thing. It was just like, man, he's looking sharp today. He's kind of going for it. I wonder if he's going to, play drums for somebody after school later. And that's not even a shot at you. That's just like, if you were wearing that, because being from Erie, like, there's probably one of those outfits in your closet. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's fair to say the majority of, I guess, I don't know, people who grew up in Erie, you get it, right? So if you were wearing your outfit, you probably had something big going on that day. So, an iconic look from our man, Andrew. So, lots going on. I guess what I'm trying to say is Leaving Through the Window is important.
Okay.
That's all.
I'm just here to
important. Relay a message that's been true and talked about in better use of fewer words and fewer minutes and with better stories way before this many times, I'm sure.
All right.
Back to you, partner.
All righty. So I really liked the instrumentation in Nobody's Listening. They had that kind of like flute thing going on. And I thought it was like groundbreaking, but obviously J5 did it way before they did. I'm sure a lot of people did it around the same time and before they did. But I always just thought it was very fun. And then I like the part going into the second verse where he does this like kind of pitched up, like rolling vocal fry thing where he's like, and that always blew my mind. And I know that he's like not the first person to do it, but I hear it sometimes in other artists and it just makes me think of like this song specifically. Like he could have just said but he did the like it was just so nice. It was just such a nice little touch. And I think so many things through this album just shows like So much thought, so much care went into it. Some stuff that people would probably never ever notice, think about, care about, whatever. But I've listened to this song. I don't even think I mentioned this. After I got into Linkin Park, I was going through like a really hard time in my life.
I was going to say, because you went from that basement to like a pretty rough stretch for you personally with, I don't know how much you wanted to say why or whatever,
Yeah.
but did you fall deeper into hybrid theory or this or both? Were there playlists on that little, on the iPod or what?
Yeah, Meteora was like maybe the only thing I listened to for like.
Is it moodier? Is there
Almost
one
a
that's
year.
moodier? Like, because like if you look at Enema, it's a little more wild. Take Every Man's a Jacket is definitely like the moodier Divorced Parents album, right? If we're talking about Blink, are there like moods or why would you turn on Meteora versus Hybrid Theory as a child?
I feel like Hybrid Theory was more like borderline angry, whereas Meteora was just like felt like helplessly depressed, which is what like
Interesting.
I was as a 13-year-old child, 14, going through like a second divorce, abusive step parents, and I felt like no one I knew believed me. No one understood how I felt, and I just felt so fucking alone. And then I heard Meteora and like heard the things that Chester sang about, and it just felt like someone understands. These songs are written for me. And looking back, it's always like, okay, so when you hear the Wonder Years singing about anxiety and you listen to it over and over and over, is it actually helping, or is it just encouraging you to feel that way forever? Because like someone you look up to feels that way, so you like kind of feel like it's okay. Like, I don't know if it kept me in that place longer, but it really, really, really was there for me when like no one else and nothing else was.
I think that the Upsides by the Wonder Years that you just mentioned, I don't know if it helps, but I do enjoy hearing somebody dig out from the depths of whatever they've fallen into, right? It's fun to hear someone have a roadmap of sugar cereal and getting out into the sunlight and riding there, like going to the fountain and being out in the world and trying to claw out. That's an interesting album to kind of go back and listen to, because if it catches you at a time where you need it, it's interesting. And this one caught you at a time that you needed it, it sounds like. I guess my part two, what I wanted to say was, with all that in mind, is true real fandom that like you just love a band and will defend them. Like, does it have to be that intimate? Like, is that what fandom is at its core, do you think? Or if you look at some of the bands you like, and it's one thing to enjoy music, but it's one thing to love a band. Is Linkin Park that for you? And was this a prime example of that? And do you even agree with that premise, or where are you at on that? Like, do you think fandom is tied to how like in your like heart some of this stuff lies? Like, or just has to get that deep into the amount of listens it would take to, I don't know, look at the lyrics 4 different ways by the time you're done listening to it 1,000 times or whatever.
Right. I mean, I think what was interesting about that is I like worshipped the band, but I didn't like really worship the people, I feel like as I got older, I became more interested in the people as individuals, because you started seeing them as that rather than these like gods that make music just for you and no one else. But yeah, I ate up everything they did. I remember like crying because my mom wouldn't let me join their fan club because I was like 13, and it's like, you need an adult's permission to do this. And she like didn't like the music. And I was just like, I need to be a part of this community. Like, I watched all their live DVDs, all their behind the scenes stuff, the making of this album when they were like spray painting their huge murals. I really loved the whole like mixed media projects that they did along with it. I thought it was really fascinating, and just, yeah, I think like the deep visceral reaction that I had to the music and the lyrics is what made me so attached to them, not like the people. Although the one story I do have, going back to the DC thing, I remember watching Live in Texas, and Rob had a DC hat on, and I like found out it was a brand, and I wore nothing but DC shirts for like probably a solid 3 or 4 years, and shoes.
When did your first day at Iroquois in 7th grade? Is that right in the middle of all that, or at the beginning?
It was right in the middle, I guess. And I remember the exact outfit down to the belt I was wearing that day.
Yeah. I'm sorry if you just said this, but did you base it on a look specifically or a music video specifically?
No,
Like, was
I
there a
just,
specific DC thing or?
I mean, not really. I was kind of into, skateboarding back then and got all the Trans World magazines and all that.
Well, skateboarding had gone from like, hey, it's gaining popularity to like what we were probably on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 at that point, like a second video game, like it wasn't, tech decks were probably had filled many a stocking in Christmases through and through, over and over at that point. So who could have blamed you? I just watched the movie mid-90s. It's on Amazon Prime right now.
Oh, so
like,
good.
It was a freaking roller coaster. Kudos to Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
But it was that kind of was a snapshot at the beginning of when there was still just like kind of cult followings of, Dogtown and the Z-Boys that Heath Ledger's in. That's such a good movie. Kind of people that were into skateboarding before it was a video game, basically. I've always kind of envied that. Getting in on something that anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. But it surprised me very little that DC was a popular clothing company that you wore, I guess is what we're trying to get at, right?
All because of, was it Rob Borden?
Rob Dyrdek? No, just kidding. I don't know. I'm joking. Rob Dyrdek did not define culture or style. Unless you grew up on Robin Big, which I can't hate on it, but also, come on, you didn't. I don't know.
So give me another one, or is it my turn again? I don't know how.
No, I'm gonna hit you.
Okay.
I'm gonna say. Okay. There's so much about this album that I feel like I'm not giving it enough credit because you're doing such a good job on this episode, and I am not. All I said was that he wore khakis and funky shirts together. It was like he was preppy enough to define a generation. He was like the Kurt Cobain of the khaki wearers of the early 2000s, which is hopefully not what people take from what I'm trying to say. But I'm going to say that Punk Rock Princess, this is not one of my takes, is something that Jesse and I put on pretty much every road trip playlist we have. It's a song that we both enjoy very much together. And there's like a new appreciation of this record after I had met her. So there is a special, we had just talked about like where fandom kind of sets in. You're like, man, this song transcends decades for sure. And just, God, that song is fun. I'm going to say that I have an appreciation. This is not a take necessarily, but it is one of my 5. Woke Up in a Car is the... Okay, I'm just going to give you my 2 final ones. One of my takes was that the lyric, if I were her, I'd paint my body until all my skin was gone, from Woke Up in a Car, is just so fucking cool and awesome. And that song, Mississippi Underneath, or On Her Knees, I mean, or whatever it is, I could never... Every time I hear the song, I hear it differently. But that song it rocked my socks. It knocked my socks off and it rocked the socks and then knocked them off. But I think that lyric is one of my 5 takes. It was like, holy shit, like, wow, goodness, right? It's good music. My last take is I would listen to an argument that tried to claim that Hurricane was one of the top 2 songs on the record. It's not, but I'd listen to the argument because I think Punk Rock Princess and Woke Up in a Car are easily the top 2. But I really want, and I haven't formulated the argument in my own head yet, but Hurricane is so good. I want to hear and tweet at the show at _FM if you agree or disagree or whatever. But it just tells you the depth. I mean, that song 5 or 6, you're getting pretty deep in, and Hurricane comes, and, before we even get to Kavanaugh Park and everything like that, and you're just like, oh, I don't know. You're like, it's not just like a good first 3 songs. We often talk about the My Chemical Romance, 3 Cheers to Sweet Revenge stuff where the front loaded, real like, oh my God, they go 4 or 5 songs deep. Wow, Yeah. But we're not like our parents got high and listened to like hours of records without anything else really to do, I guess, or whatever. That's what it sounds like based on the stories they tell. It was only ever drugs and records, or maybe that's just my dad. But, but to get that 6 songs deep in the iPod era and be like, oh, Hurricane is a fucking bop. It low key slaps, even though people weren't talking like that back then. It was, to me, just a testament to the strength of the album. On this pod, we talk about the front to backness a lot, and it was, you can go very deep into this without any weak spots, other than the first track, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to say, and I guess we could have done a whole episode on this alone, but those are kind of my takes. Khakis, his look in the Punk Rock Princess music video, the lyrics, specifically tattoo stuff, and mostly all the lyrics in Woke Up in a Car. the abbreviation of one of the words in If You See Jordan, AIM era, very telling. You put it in a freaking, what do they call those? Not time machines, but time boxes.
Capsule.
A castle?
Capsule.
Capsule. Yeah, I was castle. You're way off. No, you actually had it. You had me all the way, partner. That the first song kind of sucks. It doesn't suck. It's just in the wrong spot. Sorry, guys. And I want to hear your best argument for why Hurricane is one of the top 2 songs on that record. Those are kind of my 5 biggest thoughts that are in my brain when I revisit this album. I can't wait to walk my dog while listening to it tomorrow after recording this. It's a heavy hitter. I would say I don't know if we'd ever be as bold as to rank the top 10 pop punk album. Is it pop punk is a question I guess that we'd have to answer. Is it preppy?
It's pop rock.
Pop rock. Yeah. Man, now that we're getting deeper and deeper, it's like, would this be a top 10 record?
I mean,
of all the things we discuss on the show.
Again, I hadn't listened to it until today, but it's so good.
There's so many good songs. The heavy hitting songs on it are good, and it goes deep when you go down the Sunday corporate rabbit hole. So Erica brought up some interesting points. You start talking about the Blinks and everything like that, and we're like, okay, we're going to the early 2000s. We're ranking a top 10. And then Erica comes along out of nowhere on Twitter, and it's like, hey, by the way, Linkin Park and something corporate. Like, Linkin Park and something corporate? God, damn it. You're like, where do these really good albums go? And they're just somewhere on your iPod waiting to get rediscovered before a trip, and you kind of fall back into these patterns of listening and everything. And even during recording this, you're like, oh, remember the Wonder Years? I'm like, man, I haven't listened to the Upsides in so long. Music is so great, but that's not a hot take, obviously. But yeah, where do you put these? I don't know if I think what I'm trying to say is I don't know if they're iconic, but they're at least B+ if you're looking at all the early 2000s bands, both of these. I mean, Linkin Park obviously was very important to a very large amount of people, and you haven't even finished your take, so I'm kind of bogarting this, but I guess I'm saying both of these, we kind of squeezed them in. Is that telling, or is something corporate less or more, or do they both kind of live in that B+, A- range? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know, man. I mean, my biggest argument for how good Linkin Park is I was driving to band practice one day. I was playing drums in a band, God, it was 22, 23. And I came screaming into this church parking lot and locked the brakes up. And my friend Eric's just outside smoking a cigarette. And he's like, yo, why are you in a rush? And I was like, oh, am I? I was just listening to Linkin Park. It just got me so hyped, dude. So.
Well, I mean, Chester is, bands aside, well, Andrew McMahon's dope too. But Chester, I think, is one of those figures that kind of transcends the bands and the songs themselves. I think if you go back and look at the top 10, I guess, names or figures or lead singers, I don't know if lead singers would be right, but Chester's one of those, if you were doing one of those, I love the 80s, but early 2000s type shows, people would be talking about Chester before they'd reference McMahon, maybe. Do you think Chester's more famous than the band itself, or when people will look back at all this? And how are you about a year out? We never really touched on this. Do we ever do a tribute episode for him or anything like that?
No, I feel not uncomfortable.
You were hesitant when we texted about it after it happened.
Yes.
I feel like.
Yeah, because, not that we make any money, but a lot of people were trying to make money grabs. This is a video we made and we run ads on it, and it's the day after, this tragic event.
Plus, you revisited the music and had needed a moment for yourself, just because you are just a huge fan, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard to see this person that helped me through so much mental trauma, be a victim of mental trauma. I was at work when I found out, and my buddy Jimmy knew how important the band was to me because we got talking at some point, and I think you just texted me Chester frowny face, and I was like, what the f*** does that mean? And then I happened to be on Twitter and saw it, and dude, they just gave me the rest of the day off. I was sitting in the van just crying, and it's not I have this emotional connection. Well, I guess I do, but it's not I follow the band or his life, but it was just dude, he gave purpose to my life, and it was just how could someone who helped me feel better be so lost himself? And it was it was horrible. I mean, it still kind of sucks. See a therapist, man. Like, therapy is dope. I will recommend that every single day of my life.
Yeah.
And mental health is important. So those are the main takeaways from this episode. If you don't mind me sliding back into my last two things I really love about Meteora, we're running pretty long. We'll get through
Yeah,
it.
sorry. I went to kind of the wrap up phase of it all, but yeah,
That's
sorry.
all right. I kind of just don't even care anymore because your wrap up was so good. But
Oh, thanks. I was trying to put a cap on, like, we revisit these once you get past talking about Blink-182 and Taylor Swift all the time. That's kind of a joke about about the show we do. But, it's just like, man, Something Corbett and Linkin Park both deserve more. And sorry, yeah, please just deliver the takes, I guess.
So, okay. I listened to this album 1,000 times before I saw Live in Texas, and I never knew there was an electric guitar in any of this music. It is so distorted, so compressed, and so flat and even throughout the whole thing. It could just be a synth pad. But they do a really interesting thing with it where, like, it could have just been a synth. They didn't need to have the full band in it, but they made it work and they made it really interesting. And it was just funny that, like, I didn't even know it was there. And just the scratchiness they put on it in the chorus of Nobody's Listening. It is just expertly done, and I love it. And I love them for doing the full band, but integrating it with their other, like, electronic DJ side. I think they did it very well. And then the last standout thing, I mean, there are so many, I could have given 100, but Lying From You is such a good song. And I love the intro because it starts off with that little synthy part, and then it's like the most explosive chicka chickas from the electric guitar I've ever fucking heard in my life. And I remember in our band, we used to love chicka chickas, but these are like on a different level. It's so fucking fat, and I love it. And the other part of Lying From You that I really, really love is, again, a very, very small detail I didn't hear the first 100 times. And now, as like an audio engineer, as a producer, I really, really admire is in the verses, there's like this really cool thing where the beat's like doom, doom, ksh, doom, doom, doom. And on that very last kick there's like this kind of subtle but present, like 808 hit or like bass drop that they do on that second kick drum, and it's like dun dun ksh, dun dun boo. And it's just like, when you hear it, it is incredible. And again, small things like that probably 90% of people would never notice make this album an absolute fucking masterpiece.
Is it your favorite Linkin Park album?
It's so hard, man. I mean, because Hybrid
Theory in your top
is
two?
insane. I mean, they're two of the great. I probably say this about everything on the show. Two very, very, very good, if not some of the greatest albums from.
Well, if we ever did a Desert Island album or a Desert Island episode again, is there a world where those two albums would end up on your top 5?
I tend to go for happier stuff on those types of things, but I'd say at least one of them deserves it, but they may not end up there.
Right. Okay. I will say one last thing. Yeah, I didn't appreciate this album until college, mine, the one I'm representing, Leaving Through the Window. And it sucks realizing it was so good so late, because I didn't get to like tie it into anything other than way after I rediscovered what it was after it was late, to be late on the lateness, to realize that my now wife and I both love Punk Rock Princess so much. We almost tried to squeeze it into the wedding somehow, but there wasn't quite the right moment for it. So, but yeah, that's my only regret, I guess, is that, I was looking at their Wikipedia page a little bit, and, let's just wrap up the episode. We're not doing the history of the band, but apparently it was a culmination of one of their band members said it was kind of a greatest hits of their early stuff and all the things. I guess there was almost a song called If I Were a Terrorist, I'd Bomb the Graduation, written in high school, along with If You See Jordan, back when they were a little more angry. But after 9/11, they decided not to include it moving forward and everything like that. So that's kind of an interesting Wikipedia nugget that may or may not be true.
Well, it's also interesting because I texted you a while ago saying we should try to do a show about songs or albums that were affected by 9/11, because Jimmy Eat World changed the name of their album Bleed American, which released shortly beforehand. And I think there's probably a couple cool little history things in there.
Probably. That'd be a tricky one to do, but we have to. It's kind of like the Baja Men thing. It's like, are we good? Like, I don't know if we open up that.
Are we putting?
If we open up that chest, we have to do it right.
Right.
But it's a very good idea, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think this was an interesting exercise. Thanks to Erica. Hopefully, this is what you were looking for, because we did this for you. Because we're sorry about the Incubus delay. It's never coming. We're never doing an Incubus episode, and hopefully, this filled up for that. It was fun, but it mostly just made me jealous that your album was closer to your your heart than mine was to mine. But I still do fucking love that album.
Well, that's good, man. I can't wait to dig into something corporate. No songs of the week this week, because frankly, I don't think we have any, and it ran long. Listen to something corporate in Meteora.
Nope, I got one.
Oh,
don't you do this.
Dude, come on. Put it.
There's a new
for
Charlie Bliss record. That's it. End the episode right after this. Charlie Bliss, Capacity. There's a new Charlie Bliss record. F*** you. I love Charlie Bliss. I'll talk about it next week. Bye.
Love you, dude. See it. All right, everybody. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end. Erica, thank you so much for getting us to do this episode. I had a lot of fun. If anyone else out there has recommendations for episodes to cover, tweet at us at _reminiscentfm. And while you're at it, let us know what your favorite Linkin Park album is. I know they had a bunch of good ones after Meteora. I was not there for them. Let us know. Love you guys. Bye.